You're standing on the top of a mountain. In every direction, there's a vast expanse of desert. You can make out the contours of the hills, but the gradations of beige seem to go on forever. You can see occasional groves of trees that surround a spring. In this terrain, these are the difference between life and death for the traveler. Off to your left is the Dead Sea, and beyond it are all the places you've been these last 40 years. But if you look straight ahead and squint your eyes, you can see not the past, but the future. The spot that will become Jerusalem, the very center of holiness, where your people have been before and will be again. You will meet God here, one-on-one. You will have that intimate, personal conversation that you've wanted your whole life. But you also know that the reason you're here is that you won't make it to Jerusalem. Your consolation is this moment, this view, this glimpse into the future. You are Moses, and this is Mount Nebo. You think back all those days of exhaustion and rage and frustration and love and joy and tension and triumph, and the tender times too, the long conversations deep in the desert, the quiet details that no one will ever read about or know. You were a kid when it all started. You didn't know a thing. But all that is history now, and time is running short. Whatever's left will be someone else's burden, someone else's joy. Several months ago, I was watching my nephews play in the pool. Their beautiful young faces were laughing and taking it all in. The sunshine, the sound of their splashes, the companionship, and the delight. I was surprised when I felt this sudden sadness. Out of nowhere, I was profoundly aware of the eventual inevitability of my own death. It's not that I've never thought about dying. It would be impossible for a rabbi or anyone intimately involved in the life cycle to ignore the truth of our mortality. But this was something different. It might have been the first time I really thought about the world that I won't be around to enjoy. There will be, God willing, there will be many generations of beautiful young faces long into the future. There will be, I hope that there will be, laughing splashes in the swimming pool long after I'm here to see them. You might be thinking, she's got it backwards. She should be thinking about the beginning of life right now, not the end. But in a way, that's just it. Beginnings and endings are inextricably linked. And the more invested I become in what's going on in my life, the more attached I am, the more I want to cling to it. Making peace with the brevity of our lives falls somewhere in between tough and impossible. Moses himself does not exactly go gentle into that good night. His first reaction, according to the Midrash, is to draw a circle around himself, stand in it, and say, "Master of the universe, I will not budge from here until you void the decree that I must die." Heaven and earth and the elements of the universe actually wonder whether God will alter the workings of nature for the sake of Moses. But even the Torah's greatest character is subject to the laws of life and death. Still, it should comfort us to know that resistance to the whole idea is natural and understandable. As William Saroyan said, everybody has to die, but I always believed an exception would be made in my case. Of course, the end of our life does not mean the end of our impact. Psychiatrist and author Irvin Yalom calls this phenomenon rippling. He writes, "The effect we have on other people is in turn passed on to others, much as the ripples in a pond go on until they're no longer visible, but continuing at a nano level. The idea that we can leave something of ourselves even beyond our own knowing offers a potent answer to those who claim that meaninglessness inevitably flows from one's finiteness and transiency." Consider the Midrash in which Moses sees God affixing crowns on the letters of the Torah. He asks God what they're there for. If you want us to learn something from them, why not just tell us? Why hide the meaning in symbols? God explains that the great Rabbi Akiva will come many generations into the future. He will derive brilliant lessons from every last one of those crowns. Moses asks God to see Rabbi Akiva at work, and he's immediately transported into his classroom. The discussion is so sophisticated that Moses can't understand a word of what's being taught. One of the students asks Akiva, "Master, where did you learn this?" And Akiva's answer, "I learned it from Moses at Mount Sinai." Moses, of course, is stunned, as such advanced concepts never crossed his lips or his mind. However, it's clear to Akiva that these are Moses' lessons. The things that we say, the lessons and values we pass on, will reach far beyond what we can ever know. They may be translated into lessons that we ourselves wouldn't even understand. As Henry Adams said, a teacher affects eternity. He can never tell where his influence stops. A friend of mine describes a simple interaction which is frequent in his household. His boy says, "Thanks, Dad," and he replies, "You're welcome, son." He imagines his son in his 50s when his own kid calls him up from college and he answers the phone, "Hello, son." That's a ripple. It will be a lasting resonance of my friend and his love. Yalom also teaches us to embrace these moments of confrontation with death as moments of truth. He writes, "Though the physicality of death destroys us, the idea of death saves us." What could he mean that the idea of death saves us? Yalom describes two modes of existence as proposed by German philosophers. There is everyday mode and also what he calls ontological mode. In everyday mode, we observe the world and find a way to navigate through it. That's where we are most of the time. That's where we are every day. It's how we get things done, drive to work, earn our paychecks, put food on the table. We are primarily concerned with how things are in the world and what that means for us in practical terms. In ontological mode, we marvel that things are, that we are. The very fact of our existence is worthy of awe. Only in this mode, says Yalom, do we grapple with our fundamental responsibility to construct an authentic life of engagement, connectivity, meaning, and self-fulfillment. That's where we ask the big questions, make the major changes, ensure that we are spending our time in meaningful ways. For most of us, it takes an awareness of life's finitude to move into ontological mode. We can't live there all the time, but it's important to visit Mount Nebo, if you will, when we can. That's where our vision is finally clear. That's where we contemplate responsibility, honor, legacy, dignity, goodness. We have to know that our final mountain is out there, that we will be there someday. But the real point is not to despair over not getting to Jerusalem. Those who come after us will get there, and they'll do it well. The real question is, when we look back into the desert wilderness, what will we see and remember? In other words, what are we going to do between now and the day we do climb Mount Nebo? That's the point of these high holy days. That's why it's healthy, even as it is so very hard to have realizations like I did by the swimming pool. Sometimes we're tempted to go in the opposite direction. That is, we want to defy death by chasing after the fountain of youth and erecting monuments to our own egos, our own successes. If everyone knows how great I was in this lifetime, I might just last forever. Those attempts usually backfire, and we become known instead as the person who wanted everyone to know how great he or she was in this lifetime. I think about the biblical king, Abimelech, who wages a war against the Israelites. He brings his troops right up to the edge of a tower where the Israelites are gathered. A woman throws down a millstone and causes a fatal wound. As he lays there dying, Abimelech can only think of one thing. He can't bear the thought that people will know that he has been brought down by, of all people, a woman. While he can still speak, he calls his armor-bearer and commands, "Draw your sword and kill me, so that men will not say of me, 'A woman slew him.'" Generations later, in the time of King David, the Bible has the last laugh. In a completely different context, David's general, Yoav, worries that the king will be upset that he, Yoav, also brought his troops to the edge of a tower. He predicts that David will ask him, "What were you thinking? Don't you remember that guy Abimelech? Everyone knows he's the man who was killed by a woman throwing down a millstone." The Bible is reminding us not to get too caught up in how we look, now or after we're gone, and to use awareness of our mortality not to get frightened, but to get real. When I visit people who are seriously ill, whom I don't know well, by the second time I've met them, they often say, "I love you." They don't have time to wait. They dig right in and form a meaningful relationship, no matter how long it might last. That's what Yalom means when he says that the idea of death can save us. We here in everyday mode, we might have time to wait to form deep relationships, to say the things we need to say. Or we might not. We don't know. So we'd better get real. These holidays push us to think about how we want to be remembered and then to live that way. I, for one, want to be remembered by my nephews as the aunt who loved them exactly as they are, who always rooted for them and delighted in their growth, who could sing all the Muppet songs by heart, had sleepovers in the sukkah, and taught them to love the planet Earth and a good book. And I've only just begun to think about how I hope to be remembered someday, God willing, by my own child. In the blessing after the Torah reading, the one that we will hear on Yom Kippur and on Shabbat, and every time the Torah is read, we thank God, Chayei Olam Natah B'tochenu, who planted within us eternal life. There is something eternal about our lives. There is something eternal implanted in all of us. The ripples can go on forever. Our job now is to give them shape. I don't mind visiting Mount Nebo, where we can see the groves and the hills and the contours and the places we've been, where we can glimpse a future that will extend beyond our own lifetimes. It's the place for contemplation. But we have to go there open to being profoundly changed by the reflections we have on our values, experiences, blessings, hopes, struggles, and on our time here on earth. Up there is where we think about our lives. Down here is where we live them. It is my most fervent and heartfelt prayer that we be inscribed for blessing in the book of life.